Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth ever episode of Tipsy's F1 Podcast. I'm your host, Tipsy Pineapple, and today we're going to talk about Drive to Survive because I have just binged the entire series. I started at 10 a.m. my time because that is the moment that it came out, and it is almost 5 p.m. my time now, and I've watched most of the day. I've probably taken like half an hour's worth of breaks just to go to the bathroom and to go grab lunch. But in general, I've been watching all the way through. And funny enough, the reason I'm recording this now is because I have a gap. My fiance is driving home from work and we're going to go out and watch Drive to Survive episodes 1 and 2 with our friends this evening. And then throughout the week, I'll probably continue to watch Drive to Survive with her so that she at least knows what's going on, because that is her only way that she consumes Formula One. That's and all the meme channels on YouTube. But before we talk about that, I'm just going to talk about some ongoing news, things we know a little bit more about. By the sounds of things, Lance Stroll has broken his wrist. Now, I'm still unsure as to whether or not it was a cycling accident while training, because that's what the initial reports were all saying. All the blog posts that I read said Lance Stroll injured himself while cycling, while training for Formula One. And then this morning in testing, I heard a commentator say, because I was watching testing, the hour before Drive to Survive came up, because that started an hour earlier. And, I was watching it all. It was great. And they were talking about Lance Stroll having a motorbike accident, which like not much of a difference. Like if you fall off a two-wheeled bicycle or motorbike, you're probably going to sustain the same injuries. Especially, knowing Formula One drivers and the way they take speed with things, that he was probably going super fast on a bicycle or a motorbike. They could have been going the same speeds. Them, same with snowboarding, they just go crazy. Either way, he's broken a wrist, which it sounds like, a broken wrist I can imagine that would require some extensive surgery. It depends what the break is. Every break is unique, but a broken wrist sounds pretty rough, and I don't know if he's going to be ready to drive next week. There are motocross drivers who tend to break their wrists, and I imagine that takes more. I think you need more wrist strength and wrist power to handle motocross stuff, but yeah, still, driving a Formula One car, it requires your whole body, and I can't imagine the stress that Stroll must be going through, because your job is to be, a high-performance athlete. That is what Stroll is. He's a high-performance Formula One athlete, and knowing that you've injured yourself, that kind of takes away what you're hired to do. I know he's hired by his dad and everything, and his seats are safe, but that does suck. He wants to be competitive, and Aston Martin is looking more competitive this year. So this could mean he could get a rather high driver rating, or at least standings, from actually performing well this year, and missing out on the first race or two, or maybe even more. That's not good for him. But yeah, by the sounds of things, if that happens, it's most likely Felipe Drugovich who will take his place. It might be Stoffel van Dorn, because he will be done with the Formula E race that's happening tomorrow in Cape Town. He'll be able to get up to Bahrain and actually participate in the race, but I think it does make more sense for Felipe Drugovich to be taking that role, just because he has actually tested in the car. He's done a lot of laps around Bahrain recently, so it's just fresh in his mind. I think he's more equipped to do this, and it would be really cool to see Drugovich perform and how well he performs against Alonso, because Alonso's really good. If you've seen these testings that have been going on so far, Alonso has been doing some flying laps. I don't know if it's just that Aston Martin are pushing a bit harder and they're going for their push laps, but he's been looking very good. And what surprised me today is Logan Sargent actually did pretty well during the middle of the day. He got quite a good time in the Williams. It's fallen down now, and I'm sure towards the end of the day, there's still like an hour and a half to go. Towards the end of the day, I'm sure we'll see some more grid order changes of who's doing faster laps. But overall, the laps times right now, they're only like a second off last year's Q3 qualifying time. I think they're actually almost on par with Q1 of last year. So that's kind of good to see. It means that the cars are still fast. The regulations haven't changed that much, and I can imagine that Red Bull would actually be the main failures here if their car was slower than last year, and they seem to be catching up to that pace. I'm sure they've still got some tweaks to do. We are getting a bit of an idea of what's going on. I can see Mercedes is not doing that great, but again, this is testing. We can't really blame them. It's hard to know who's going all out. Everyone's on different run plans. They're all trying out different things. Day two's especially weird because they might be trying out some slightly different philosophies. Tomorrow, we'll see how testing goes. Either way, it's testing. We're only going to really see the true pace at qualifying, in my opinion. And in everyone else's opinion. So let's wait and see what happens. Finally, just part of testing, I see Crofty's been wearing a very shiny bling jacket that he gave to his co-commentator, Anthony. Sorry, I don't actually know if his name's Anthony or Anthony. One of the two, basically the same. If I messed it up, it's fine. Looks like Russell's just actually caused a red flag on the track as well. But now they're both shiny Las Vegas representatives. They both have shiny little Las Vegas jackets. And we saw Gunther in a shiny little Las Vegas jacket as well. So that was pretty cool to see. Anyways, let's get to the meat of today's episode. It is Netflix's Drive to Survive. As I mentioned, I love Drive to Survive. I really, really enjoy it. It was my intro into the sport. Well, my intro into the sport was I had a lot of friends watching Formula One. My parents used to watch it ages ago when I was very young, and then I'd watch it then, but I didn't really know what was going on. I was just like, you're supposed to support Michael Schumacher because he always wins, and that way I'll always be happy. So I was just like, cool, there's the red car, I'm happy, let's go. It was great. But 2 decades later, my friends were suddenly into Formula One, and it was like, whoa, this is weird. Why are all my friends into this? This was after I moved away from my hometown. So I found out during COVID that they were all into it, and I was planning on moving back to my hometown after lockdown rules changed. So I moved back. All my friends were into Formula One, and they told me, go watch Drive to Survive and you will enjoy it too. And then from there on, just watch the Formula One channel. And there on, I found like the WTF1 podcast, which is obviously now P1 with Matt and Tommy. That's what I really found and enjoyed. I found Matt and Tommy, not the YouTube channel WTF1. They're kind of pointless without Matt and Tommy because Matt and Tommy are those personalities. I'm a big fan of the P1 podcast with Matt and Tommy, as you can probably tell. I messaged my fiance earlier today. I was like, I become an emotional snowflake when it comes to Netflix's Drive to Survive, because it is just so, like, it brings out those dramatic moments. Like, they showed Zhou Guan Yu's crash, and I thought, like, oh, this is really sad. They did a little bit of the hype of, like, is he okay? Is he not okay? Etc., etc., etc. And at least they didn't drag it out as long as they did for Grosjean, because there wasn't like an immediate fire or anything. It was just he was stuck. And it was quite weird actually seeing those close-up videos of what was going on. Zhou wasn't really moving much, so that was a bit scary. But to be fair, when you're hanging upside down in an F1 car, you can't really move that much. So it makes sense that he was just chilling there, being calm and hanging out. Other things I loved about it, this goes without saying that this is obviously a big spoiler to Drive to Survive. I should have probably mentioned that at the start. In fact, I will mention that at the start. All these podcasts are spoilers, and there will be spoilers because I'll be talking about current events. I'll be talking about the race that has happened, etc. You read the title to the video. You know that this is about Drive to Survive. I'm not actually going to do a spoiler warning. I've changed my mind. I love the start of the series because you had Gunther and Binotto, like the two clowns of Formula One. No offense to Binotto. Huge respect. I think he's really cool. I'm very sad to see him go. And it was actually quite nice to see a more fun side to Binotto. Like, he actually has a personality. He's actually a funny dude. He's actually a nice guy. But from my personal experience of watching him throughout the Formula One seasons has just been, he doesn't take accountability for things. And he doesn't say that the teams are making a mistake. He just says like, oh, it's fine. They did nothing wrong. And like, that's the wrong attitude to have in the sport, obviously. You can always improve and you should always be focusing on improving. You should not tolerate bad strategy choices because that's just not good. I see here on the side now, George Russell's Mercedes is wrapped in a black tarp and they're going to take it away like that. I guess that's a funny one. There he is chilling outside the car. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. I liked the season of Drive to Survive. What did I think? I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. I don't know. People say it wasn't amazing or it was good. Drive to Survive is always fun and amazing for me, and the timing has been a bit odd because I've kind of wanted to watch practice all day long, and now I couldn't do that because I had to binge Drive to Survive so I could do this show, and also just so I could not think about it because I'm starting a brand new job next week Wednesday, and I should have probably binged this today, and that was my job, which was great. I liked how most of the stories were covered. I feel like they actually didn't skip out on too much things that happened. They covered most of the stories, and they did get some good angles of things that I didn't know, or they tried to sway my opinion on things, which is funny. I don't have very strong opinions on most things, but what I really liked was they have Max back. They've actually convinced Max to come in and step in, and obviously I'm sure they were trying to be very nice to Max and not offend him, because they offended him in season 1 and then we just didn't see Max for like 4 years, and now Max is back in Drive to Survive and he's willing to give interviews, and I think it's good. I think it's really nice to see him in Drive to Survive, and it's nice to see him getting respected, because I think he does deserve it, even though a lot of people may not agree. When it comes to Lewis and Max, during that 2021 battle, I was supporting Max purely because Max was the underdog. Last year, I was supporting anybody who wasn't Max because Max wasn't the underdog. I just like there to be a close battle, and I kind of just respect the drivers on their day-to-day basis on the way they race. Like, Stroll's a good example. Stroll, I'll start to respect him, and then he'll do something really dumb in a race. I'll be like, what are you doing, you fool? And then, he does well in another race, and I'm like, cool, you're kind of all right again. Like, that thing of just being quick to forgive drivers for being childish, because they are all children. I mean, most of the drivers are younger than me, and I'm only 28. I think 28 is relatively young. Either way, back to Drive to Survive. What I felt was a bit rushed, and this might just be a personal bias because I made a video on the driver's silly season story, because there was a lot that went on and there was a lot of timing and there were other drivers involved as well, but it felt like they really scoped that down and narrowed the focus there, which I think they had to, because they could only do like 10 episodes. That's always the case. They only do 10 episodes. What I just felt was that silly season process was a bit rushed. It was just suddenly like, Nick de Vries is here. Oh, by the way, this is why Nick de Vries is here. He did well in Monza. Cool, great. Latifi wasn't featured at all, so it's a bit sad to not really see him anywhere. I think that was one. Let me think of the drivers that weren't featured. So they had Alex Albon. They didn't really talk about him. They just had him interview and speak about things. Zhou Guanyu was barely featured. He was in the crash. They said, hey, I'm here, but they didn't follow his story at all. They didn't really follow Bottas at all either. They also mentioned him a bit, but that was it. Seb was in it, not that much. Stroll wasn't in it at all. I don't remember I saw obviously videos of Stroll being around, but he wasn't really interviewed. I don't know, maybe it's his previous, he might be offended with the way Netflix has portrayed him as well. I think that could be the case, because they made all these cringe moments of diamonds are made under pressure and stuff like that. They really got Stroll in his most awkward, cringy state. So I feel like Stroll might be taking a couple years break from Netflix and avoiding talking to them. We didn't have any, we had some Aston Martin, but not that much. It was mostly oh yeah, Alonso's going to Aston Martin, it's going to be cool. But in general, Aston Martin didn't feature that much. Well, I mean, they kind of did, but they featured as side characters to everyone else. Other than that, I mean, the drivers and people who didn't feature, well, Ocon didn't feature that much. He wasn't really too much of a talking point, even though there was a big Alpine story and it was whoa, what's happening here? What I did like was at the end, again, now I'm going to the ending, so I'm really spoiling stuff, is they did a nice tribute of Daniel Ricciardo, not in F1, but in Drive to Survive, his role in Drive to Survive and how he is quite a key figure. And they were this is the last time you're going to be in Drive to Survive. And it was whoa, that's actually hard to set in. And they got all the moments of they just got all those good moments. So flip, nutsack, let's go, whoop, whoop, whoop. Oh, that was too good. It was just too good. I also like the way that Kevin Magnussen at the end, he was oh, I got a new teammate next year and he can suck my balls, which was also quite funny. I just thought that was great. I loved the story. Oh my gosh, the one intro was after, it was after Haas got their points at Bahrain. My uncle actually told me this. He was there's a quote of Gunther Steiner saying something that's not really family friendly. I want to keep my content rather family friendly, I guess. Even though I've made some statements about balls, but soccer balls, footballs, those kinds of balls, I guess. I don't know. Either ways, Gunther Steiner said that he would have hugged everyone in the paddock. But in Gunther's accent, it came out as he would have beeped everyone in the paddock, which I just thought was hilarious. I'm going to go make a YouTube short out of that. I thought that was so funny. By the way, this podcast is actually now available on a bunch of places. I think the only place it's not available right now is Google Podcasts, because they have more of a vetting process, so it takes longer for that to happen. But it's pretty much everywhere else. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcast. It is on YouTube, but I'm telling you right now, YouTube people, definitely subscribe and follow to me on one of your favorite podcasting platforms, because my podcast will go out there first and then onto YouTube, because I usually edit the MP3s for the podcast and send it out very quickly. And then I take some more time to actually compile into the YouTube video and do all the other stuff on YouTube video. It's just the way podcasting works, okay? Basically, you publish it on a podcast platform and it just sends it everywhere and it's good to go. When YouTube, I have to be a bit more involved in that process of uploading it and all that stuff. Either way, I know I've just been talking about the ending, but what was kind of sad was the ending just kind of snuck up on me. Drive to Survive did find a good way to make a pretty boring F1 season rather entertaining. They did remind us of those good battles. They showed us those good crashes, and yeah, we just had some good stuff. Another thing that they didn't really bring up, which I thought they would, because literally at the start of the season, like in the first episode, they said like coming up this year, and it got me all excited, was there was Pierre Gasly going past the tractor in Suzuka. And, you know, Netflix was definitely there for Suzuka because they covered a bunch. But they didn't want to cover that FIA issue with the tractor. Like, I guess the FIA was like, yo, you can't put this in there, otherwise we'll can Drive to Survive. So you can definitely see Netflix is treading carefully in some topics, and they're too scared to bring things up, which is a bit of a shame. Similar thing with the Max and Perez drama that was starting to come out towards the end of the season. They definitely didn't want to touch that at all, because obviously Red Bull is quite important. I mean, Max would definitely not want to talk about it. They've just got a Max back. And Christian Horner is like the Drive to Survive mascot. So aside from Daniel Ricciardo, Christian Horner is the guy that you follow. And he's probably not going to be too happy about Netflix portraying some sort of rivalry between Max and Perez, unless Christian Horner himself is saying those claims and making that up, so he's the storyteller. But he's not currently the storyteller, and I think that's a very tight topic. They obviously did mention, you know, early at the start of the season, he was like, oh, I might get rid of Perez, and then Perez did his Monaco thing, which, funny enough, that's where the controversy comes with the whole Max Perez drama, is how Monaco went and how he did stuff. But looking back at that race on Monaco, like, it's kind of hard to see. I was just thinking now again, like, for me, obviously, Perez won Monaco, but he didn't qualify first in Monaco. He qualified third instead of fourth, and he was still on a flying lap as far as I know, unless Drive to Survive is gaslighting me again. It could be gaslighting me, I could be wrong. But that just kind of takes away that motive of wanting to bin it, because I felt like Perez might have been able to do a Foster lap and qualify second, and then he could go bin it, you know? I don't really remember. I don't remember if he was on a push lap or not. I'd actually have to go look at that again. I'm not going to, because I'm too lazy. But all in all, I thought the Perez would have done that on like an out lap or an in lap, or some sort of lap where he was like not going for it and pushing it. So I'm just slightly confused there. Either way, that was that. I'm trying to think now, what was the other things that came up? I guess the McLaren Alpine battle, that was a strong story that they were pushing and punting, which is true. That was a battle. That was a big battle the whole time. It was like, can McLaren beat Alpine? And I like how the silly season of McLaren stealing Oscar worked out. And I like those behind the scenes jokes of like, oh, I bet Oscar's sad now that he decides to go with McLaren after McLaren was losing and Alpine was crushing it. But at the same time, I believe Alpine was crushing it because they had Alonso, and they're losing Alonso now. And based off what I can see in testing, like Alonso he's going all out in testing. This actually makes me want to go back to talking about testing. Forgive me. I know this episode is supposed to be about Drive to Survive, but I want to talk about testing again. And we will talk more about testing later on in the week. But specifically around Alonso, with Stroll not being there during the session, Alonso is kind of like leading the sales here. He's taking it. He's guiding the team to build a car that suits him, which is really good. I think this is really good for Aston Martin, because I feel like they would have picked Stroll. They would have kind of just been like, okay, cool. Stroll, what do you want? You want it like this? Okay, Alonso wants it this way, but we don't care. Stroll, your daddy's son. We'll do it this way. By the time that they eventually get Stroll to start racing, Alonso would have already helped guide the development of the car to go according to his driving style, which is really good for Alonso. And as a whole, I think it is really good for the Aston Martin team, because I think Alonso, well, while I know Alonso is the more experienced driver, but I also believe and think that Alonso will perform better than Stroll this year, assuming that there aren't any meddlings from the Aston Martin strategy team. I think that's the main thing. If Aston Martin can just not dedicate Stroll, like, and put all their priority on Stroll, I think they'll be a really good competitive team, and I think they're easily going to be fourth. I'm going to assume and predict that they'll be getting a couple of podiums this year, which is really exciting to see, because I love seeing Peak Alonso on his podiums. It's just a real joy for me. Anyways, back to Drive to Survive. There was a lot going on there. So, you had the Pierre and Sonoda stuff going on, like talking about how Pierre's leaving. It was kind of nice to see that side of the story, because we hadn't really seen too much Pierre and Sonoda stuff throughout the year. I guess maybe we had. When I think back on 2022, with Pierre and Sonoda, the two of them, Pierre and Yuki, I thought they kind of were I mean, we didn't hear much from them because the car just was not competitive. So it was nice to see that side of the story going on a bit and to look at some of the highlights of both of their races. And, well, here's one of the lowlights. They didn't cover Tsunoda crashing into Pierre. I was surprised that they didn't cover that. I guess that must be a sore topic between the two of them, and they are trying to make that narrative of Pierre and Tsunoda bromance. I think Netflix is trying to make another bromance like the Carlando bromance, and they're trying to piggyback off that and say, we created Yuki and Pierre, which also doesn't make sense because they can't rely on that next year because next year we won't have a Yuki and Pierre. But maybe they're rolling off of the back of last year's season 4 of Drive to Survive. I don't really know. So yeah, that does bring up a few things where they just left things out. Like, yeah, again, the Pierre and Tsunoda stuff. Pierre's situation, I was talking about this. Pierre's situation with the FIA. You can tell the FIA are like, yo, don't say stuff about things we did wrong because we don't want to do that. They didn't talk about the Max controversy with the wins, which I guess it wasn't too much of a story. It was just an awkward day of the race. So it's not like this big make an episode out of it. They left out a lot of little things. I felt like George's win was very quickly like rushed over. It was like, oh, he won. Oh, this is a big thing they left out. They left out Kevin Magnussen's pole position at Brazil. I was like, come on, like, how could you not show that? That was good. It actually felt like a lot of the good racing moments were just left out. I don't think Netflix went to Brazil because Brazil was a hell of a race and they didn't show too much of it. They just kind of like, oh yeah, things happened, cool, it was great. So if anything, the only things I'm disappointed is there are some topics they didn't bring up. I guess that's my disappointment every year though. They tend to usually just decide to leave certain topics out to fit their narrative. But overall, I think they did a pretty good job at telling a lot of the stories. Like the start of the season, if you're not a Formula One watcher, you could be like, oh, wow, Ferrari's suddenly good. And without really knowing, like, hey, this has changed. Because my fiance, who doesn't follow Formula One, is going to watch that and be like, whoa, Ferrari are really good. I can't believe they won the year. And then at the end of it, it's like, oh, actually, no, Red Bull won it. Even though like they found out that they won it a lot earlier and they portrayed that in the show correctly. At the start, the first 2 seasons, you're like, whoa, Ferrari's dominating, Red Bull's on the back foot. You make Red Bull really feel like the underdogs, which they kind of were. They were at the start of the season, but Ferrari just let things slip. The problem is Ferrari didn't just let things slip and then fight to come back. Ferrari let things slip and then just fell off. In 2021, you had these crazy battles where like Lewis would shoot far in the lead and then Max would shoot far in the lead. And it was just these strokes of changing positions. And it got all the way down to the last race where the last race was hype. But this time it's like, well, the last race isn't really hype. The last race is Abu Dhabi. It's pretty boring as usual. Even 2021 was pretty boring until the last 3 laps. But overall, hey, that's Drive to Survive for you. They did make quite a big tribute to Las Vegas joining the circuit. They were like, it's part of, old drivers are leaving, which, again, they made this tribute to old drivers leaving, but I don't feel like they left too much of a tribute to Mick Schumacher. Maybe they did a little bit. They didn't speak about Latifi at all. I mean, they did say, hey, Logan Sargent's coming in, but like they didn't talk about the GOAT. I feel like Latifi deserved his own episode. He had some funny moments, He had a really funny season where he's just crashing. I feel like we needed a reason to why they got rid of Latifi. And I feel like they needed to ride the GOAT memes. But maybe, they just didn't want to interview Latifi. And Latifi was probably like, I don't really want to do anything with F1 ever again because it's just been the laughing stock of my career. But who knows? I don't know. It's hard to really tell what was going on there. I guess I keep pounding on the same points. It's just they left a lot of things out and all those things they left out are just coming back to me now. One thing I did like, this was the thing I wanted to speak about, was the fact that they did start kind of pointing towards 2023 a bit more than they've done in previous seasons. Well, not previous seasons, they wouldn't have pointed to 2023. But the point is, they pointed more into the season that is about to occur. So, for example, Oscar Piastri, I liked how they said in one situation, they were showing him as Alpine driver and he said, I am now a racing driver for McLaren. And then bam, it changed. It was like, okay, cool. They are actually focusing on the year that is about to happen in front of us. So we're more prepared going into the sport as if we're actually going to watch the sport rather than it just being like, yo, go watch Drive to Survive and then do nothing and watch it again next year. I mean, which is what my fiance is going to do anyway. She's going to watch Drive to Survive and then next year, hopefully we'll be married by then, she's going to watch Drive to Survive again. And every time I go watch a race on a Sunday, she is going to go to the beach or do literally anything else. So that's just the case. That is the case for a lot of Drive to Survive fans. They just watch Drive to Survive and they build all their opinions from that. And obviously Drive to Survive can shape people's opinions very easily because this is their only exposure to Formula One. I came into the sport with a lot of Drive to Survive opinions and then realized like, oh, hang on a second. I actually don't hate that person that much. But, you know, it is what it is. Like, these various things have happened. Anyways, there's an hour left of testing to go. I'm going to use this moment to start editing this, and this is probably going to go out later this evening after I go rewatch Drive to Survive again and form new opinions, but it's fine. Tomorrow I'm going to go watch the Formula E, so I'll talk all about that later in the weekend as well. And at the end of all the practicing stuff, sometime during the week next week, we'll talk about the full testing and new thoughts of what have emerged from testing, and maybe we'll talk about Lance Stroll's condition. And I'm sure other news will just pop up. Teams are going to complain, they're going to fight each other about regulation things, all the usual, you know what it is. Anyways, I'll catch you guys soon, and have a good one. Cheers.